Okay. Good morning, Angel. Good morning, Emily. Good morning, Gail. Good morning, Athena. Good morning, Jamuna Jaya. Good morning, Maharani Didi. Preeti, good morning. Pet Dunphy, good morning. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, AJ. Good morning, Bhima Prabhu, also known as Jeff. Where are your horses? Okay. Good. Welcome, everyone, to our morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We have a very special presenter today, Ghanashyam Prabhu. He works as a chaplain, right, Ghanashyam Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. And we want this discussion to be interactive. Please contribute. Good morning, Adipurusha Prabhu, Theodora. We can see you. Bhima Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Okay. Ghanashyam Prabhu, would you like me to share the screen or you want to share?
You can keep it like as you have it.
Okay, cool. All right, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 18, which is entitled King Yayati Regains His Youth. Text 23. Yayatir anabi pretam daivopahitam atmana manastu tatkatam bhutva pratijagrahatat vachaha. Translation. Shukadev Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it. But because it was arranged by providence and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. According to the Vedic system, the parents would consider the horoscopes of the boy and girl who were to be married. If according to astrological calculations, the boy and girl were compatible in every respect, the match was called Yotaka, and the marriage would be accepted. Even 50 years ago, this system was current in Hindu society, regardless of the affluence of the boy or the personal beauty of the girl. Without this astrological compatibility, the marriage would not take place. A person is born in one of three categories, known as Devagana, Manushya Gana, Rakshasa Gana. In different parts of the universe, there are demigods and demons, and in human society also, some people resemble demigods, whereas others resemble demons. If according to astrological calculations, there was conflict between a godly and a demoniac nature, the marriage would not take place. Similarly, there were calculations of Pratiloma and Anuloma. The central idea is that if the boy and girl were on an equal level, the marriage would be happy, whereas inequality would lead to unhappiness. Because care is no longer taken in marriage, we now find many divorces. Indeed, divorce has now become a common affair. Although formerly one's marriage would continue lifelong and the affection between husband and wife was so great that the wife would voluntarily die when her husband died, but would remain a faithful widow throughout her entire life. Now, of course, this is no longer possible, for human society has fallen to the level of animal society. Marriage now takes place simply by agreement. Dam patye virichir hetu. This is Bhagavatam, 12th canto, 2nd chapter, 3rd verse. The word abhiruchi means agreement. If the boy and girl simply agree to marry, the marriage takes place. But when the Vedic system is not rigidly observed, marriage frequently ends in divorce. Omakyan Timarandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Didati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Patakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinobandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees. Adi Purush Prabhu, ask for your blessings. I don't see everybody, so if I'm forgetting someone, please forgive me. May our words be aligned with Guru Parampara, the pleasure of Shri Shri Radha Mulidhar, and may the devotees be benefited. So we're reading from 9th Canto, 18th chapter, entitled King Yayati Regains His Youth, text 23, which I'll repeat. Shukadev Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it. But because it was arranged by Providence and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. So this chapter gives the history of King Yayati, who was a Kshatriya, but he married the daughter of a Brahmana. That Brahmana was Shukracharya. And this was actually uncommon. This is called, Prabhupada explains here, pratiloma, which when a woman of a higher status marries a man of a lower status, just like Devayani, she was from Brahmana family, but King Yayati is Kshatriya. This is, as Prabhupada says here, not sanctioned by regular scriptures. So we'll try to look at why that might be, but it was, when Parikshit is hearing from Shukadev Goswami. So the way the Bhagavatam works, Shukadev Goswami is just speaking, making various points, and Parikshit sometimes stops him with a question. And so Parikshit asked this question. This begins the whole section. How is it that King Yayati was Kshatriya, but he married the daughter of a Brahmana? This is not according to scripture. He was interested to hear how that happened. So we heard a little bit of the story, right? King Yayati, he found Devayani at the bottom of a well, and he helped her out. He grabbed her by the hand. And then she told him, by accepting my hand in this way, then I'm requesting that you accept me in marriage. And this verse is describing his response. And you see there are different things happening with his response. The first thing it says, he did not like it. And this shows his piety. He did not like it because it was generally not sanctioned in the scriptures that he should marry Brahmana. So that first, it says here in the verse, yes, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it. So it's showing his certain piety. But also, what does it say? But he was very attracted to her beauty that encouraged him somewhat to to accept this request. Seems superficial maybe, but actually a man is kind of wired this way, that beauty is usually very important for a man. And so he was attracted to her beauty. And also another factor, destiny. It says Daiva Upahritam. It was destined, it was arranged by providence, as it's put here. That's interesting, right? Because while it's against the scripture, the regular scriptures, at the same time, somehow this is being arranged. Daiva means destiny, and Upahritam means brought about by. This was also brought by providence, this arrangement. And Devayani, I think also she refers back to, because she was cursed. Previously, she was cursed that she would not marry a Brahmana. And so she's also seeing this as destined. So these three factors in this verse, Kingigati shows a certain piety. He doesn't want to go against scripture. At the same time, he's attracted to her beauty, and he's being convinced that this is also arranged by providence. And so therefore this marriage will take place. Now the purport here, there are some details about the Vedic system of marriage. And it's nice to study this actually, because one thing that's important to understand when we talk about tradition and traditional values, some people think, well, that's just outdated. It's no longer applicable. But tradition has its roots in metaphysics, in the science of life. There are different science, there are different energies, how they interact and so forth. So when we see some of these rules and regulations in the Vedic system, we could dismiss them as outdated, or we can see that they're actually related to an understanding of life, which we've lost in the present day. So it's tradition. We say, oh, that's some old tradition. It's no longer relevant. But tradition is connected to metaphysical truths, just like the whole Varnashram system. Some of those rules, we look at it, it baffles us. We think, well, that's kind of strange. Why was it like that? But if you dig deep and try to really see, everything was very scientific, according to metaphysical principles, according to principles of life, spiritual principles, material principles. And it was arranged, it's coming from that understanding. So it's sometimes worth going into it a little deeply to see what is the principle. And then the challenge for us then is that, well, times have changed so much, but that principle is still alive. So let me see how to properly use it in my life, in the here and now, under guidance of someone who can understand those principles. And that way it's beneficial. So it's not, we'll look at some of the things happening here. So scientific, first of all, Prabhupada explains in the purport, the parents, they first of all look at the horoscope of the boy and the girl before marriage. So immediately others are involved. It's not just like, I'm walking down the street and I just fall in love and become attached and get married. When we fall in love, we're crazy. Think about it. That is kind of a crazy state. And then to make a decision, a lifelong decision from that. So then here you have parents, they're considering, okay, the nature of the boy, the nature of the girl, astrological chart is examined, and the compatibility is considered. In another place, Prabhupada says the compatibility, the taste and the character of the man and woman should be the same. That's an interesting way he puts it, the taste and the character. And here we're talking about different types of men and women. It says Deva Gana, godly. We know the Deva Loka, it's a higher realm but these also refer to everyone on earth. They may have an inclination, a godly, like an inclination of that higher level here on earth. Manusha means like just the ordinary man or woman. And then Rakshasa means the lower. So that's also a place that's lower, but also here on earth, one can have these three, let's say, inclinations or character. Another factor here, Varna. This is all, closely examined, the differences between the man and the woman and the Varna. And then there's the man and woman psychology also. When we talk about that today, man and woman and differences in psychology, people kind of go into a trance. It can get very heated. It's like talking about the vaccine or no vaccine. People go into a trance. Suddenly they're just like in this other mindset, and it's very intense. So let's not go into a trance just discussing this, but let's try to see a little bit the science, why these certain rules are there. Metaphysically, what's happening? Masculine and feminine principles. Where does this come from? This comes from God, right? We understand that Krishna, the supreme source of everything, is Purusha, which means the masculine principle. And then there's Prakriti, there's material nature. And the way it's described also that Purusha, at some point, he glances at Prakriti. And that glance, it's described that glance actually impregnates material nature. And so right here, you see in a very, when we get back to the origins of just the material world itself, we see the masculine and feminine principles are active. Purusha, he's the active principle. And by his glance, material nature is impregnated. And then what comes from that combination? You could say the masculine principle, the feminine principle, and there's a combination. And what happens? Children. And what is children in this context? All living beings, all material elements, everything else becomes of the nature of Prakriti, the feminine principle. So all the children. And what does that mean? So Purusha, he's called Swarat. He's the only independent living being. And everything else has a dependence on him. And so when we talk about man and woman on our level, then often the man is said to be more independent than the woman. Woman is more dependent, right? So this has its roots in metaphysical principles. So it's something to look at because that same man, woman, masculine, feminine principles, they also show up in the here and now in our life on earth and between a man and a woman. And it's not exactly the same, but it still shows a certain similarity in some ways. And that's why there are certain rules and regulations, man and woman. It wasn't just whimsical. People just came up with some ideas to, everything could be exploited, of course, and everything can be healthy or unhealthy. But the Vedic culture was very scientific in how it was developed, how things were arranged, the dharma of a woman, the dharma of a man. This wasn't just to suppress someone or other. It can become that when there's exploitation, when it's misunderstood, but it has its roots in certain metaphysical truths. As we're seeing with the Purusha, the glance is also, sometimes that glance is said to be Shiva. And if you know the Shiva lingam is worshipped as the creative power, as the seed, just like with a man and woman, again, on our level. The man, impregnates, there's a seed, and then a child is born. So on this higher cosmic level, that glance of the Lord is sometimes also said to be Shiva, the creative force. And then it enters the Prakriti, and then everything comes from that. It's like all the children. right? And then there's a relationship. These are two different energies. These are energies. And so the same principle can operate on our level. And there's a healthy version of it. So if a man thinks, again, now Purusha is the controller, Prakriti is the controlled. Purusha is the leader. Prakriti is the led. Right? So now when it comes to the, again, our level, the earth, man and woman here, then we can see all kinds of things can go wrong with this. When the man can become also the exploiter, because if he has something in his energy, there's an energy that's different than the feminine principle. He can, instead of controlling, instead of with responsibility and care, he can exploit. And the woman can be exploited like that. So that understanding is also there. Now, how does this show up here? Let's try to translate these principles in this section too, so we can understand why Parikshit was alarmed by this pratiloma marriage. Parikshit stopped to ask a question. Well, the woman is of a higher status. How is it that she's married a man of a lower status? In other words, that's considered not appropriate. A man can do it. A man has a higher status, say a man is a Brahmana, and he can decide to marry a woman of a lower status. That's fine according to the scripture. That's called anuloma. But if you reverse it, if the woman has a higher status in society, she should not accept a man of a lower status. And what's behind that is, again, going back to the energies. We're talking about the difference in energies. Often a woman wants to look up to a man. If you look at all the different fairy tales, it's very common that an ordinary woman, just an ordinary woman, but she has this desire for Cinderella, she has this desire for some prince or some man who actually has a higher position. That's attractive. That can be attractive because then there's some assurance of being taken care of nicely and so forth. But you don't find many stories where, there's this low-class guy who's just irresponsible and, some drunkard or something, and he's thinking, I want some queen to come and find me. And he doesn't even think that's possible. He won't even consider that, right? So we'll see that actually this idea of the man of a higher status can accept a wife of a lower status, but not the opposite. There's something there. There's something to it, and it's not a whimsical rule in the Vedic culture, but it does have to do with the differences in the energies. Man often desires to take care of, to protect. And the interesting thing is, but for the man to do that properly, for the man to take care and protect a woman properly, he also has to have that relationship. Almost the feminine principle has to be activated within him with his guru. So this is why the idea was that in relationship to the guru, the man, the husband, was completely surrendered and chaste and loyal and dedicated. So he's doing the same thing a woman does, but he's doing it in relationship with guru. And then the wife of that man who surrendered to guru, if she surrenders to him, the husband, then she's benefited in the same way. That's very interesting, right? It's like, again, if you go back traditionally, man would be expected to be a completely surrendered soul to a bona fide guru. And then the wife of that man, just by serving him and surrendering to him in the right way, she gets the same exact benefit from that attachment. He's also attached, but to the guru, and then she's attached to him. And in this way, the children that are born from that too, they see it makes sense, right? The children have to have the masculine and feminine principles both healthy in a healthy way, active in their life to become healthy themselves. Right? So when they see the operating of the different energies and have that example, a good example on both sides, then the children are also benefited. So if you think of it, yeah, there's like this chain, there's God, the Supreme. And then there's the spiritual master who's in one sense connected to God as the feminine energy, because God is he's the all powerful Purusha. And the spiritual master has this attitude of service, surrender, receptive, right? So then God, spiritual master, then the man is the disciple of that spiritual master, and then the woman is the wife of that husband, and so forth, and then the children. So there is this logic to it. There's a logic. Now, when we come to applying all this, we see how things have changed so much in society, and this is an important point. And then I'll stop a little early and see if we have some discussion on this. Usually, this brings up some discussion. But another important point is, if you take one old rule from the Vedic culture, and then bring it into the modern moment, it doesn't quite work that way, because everything worked properly in the Vedic culture. It was a whole system with many parts, and all those parts supported each other. So now that whole Vedic culture is broken down. It's practically non-existent. But then some people still want to take one part and enforce it on the present moment. But because it's not supported by all the other parts, it usually doesn't work. So it's like, oh yes, the man should lead. And, that's Vedic, right? So let's do it now. Then in every relationship, the man should lead. So there's a science to it. There's a reason for that, but nothing else supports it. And it becomes hard to therefore try to apply it now, or to just try to force it separate from all the other parts that actually supported that idea. And the whole system, it was like one whole with all these little parts, and they were all purposeful. They were all deliberate, and they all worked together, and it created a certain effect, a very spiritually powerful effect, an effective result. So now Varnashram Dharma is gone. So that's not our culture. That's not our upbringing. So it also becomes difficult to take one part from there and try to make it happen now. So what do? We should still see what the principles are behind some of these rules, and see under good guidance how it could be used in our present moment. And that's like an individual project for each person, for each couple, husband and wife. They should be a little interested in the energies of men and women. They're complementary. They're different, but complementary. And even the spiritual path is different between a man and a woman. Sometimes it's said that a man has to first really find himself, and then he'll surrender. Whereas a woman, she needs to start off with surrender, and then she finds herself. It's like the yin yang, in Taoism, they have this symbol. There's a circle, and there's half of it is white, but there's a black nucleus. And the other half is the opposite, black with a white nucleus. This is also the masculine and feminine. So they're together, they're complementary. There's a whole there. But the approaches actually are almost opposite. A man needs to first find himself, to assert, to become responsible, to become strong, and then what follows from that is a kind of surrender of the heart. Whereas a woman, the approach starts with a kind of surrender of the heart. She has that, and then she finds herself, and she finds her deeper nature. So some interesting things to think about. At least I find this very enlivening to see, okay, take my time with the Vedic culture before I pass judgment on some rule between men and women. let me understand that actually there's a scientific basis to this. What is the principle behind this rule? Oh, okay, I understand now. I'm starting to see the principle. Now here's my present situation and my relationship. How could that principle come out? Because if it comes out and we actually follow the principles, we make our spiritual path a little more easy. That's the idea. When you understand your nature, another person's nature well, then the path becomes a little, there's less resistance. If we have no idea about any of this, and we're just trying to force things, and I think it should be like this, and not understanding who we are and how we work as human beings, then it becomes more difficult. And so anyway, I wanted to point that out because here we have, this verse, this purport, a lot is going on. Parikshit is saying, hey, how is it that a man of a lower status accepted a woman of a higher status? Why is that wrong? Why is that against the Shastra? So these are interesting questions, and these are just some thoughts. But I would say that though, to make it practical for us today, is to, when we read these sections, we should be educated by learning principles. Nobody teaches principles in school. You just teach information and we try to jam it into our head. And then we try to awkwardly apply it to our life. I learned this and now I want to try and do it. But there's a way of teaching where you understand principles, spiritual principles, material principles. How does the world work? Karma, that's a principle of life. It's a reality. Let me try to understand how it works. And then by understanding it, I can make things a little more easy. For what? Easy for what? Easy for spiritual advancement. That was always the motive behind all of this. It was always the reason behind all these rules, is the upliftment of the soul, to elevate the soul back to God. So I'll stop here. If there are any comments, thoughts, questions, be happy to share. Anyone?
Yeah.
Adi Purush Prabhu. You're on mute, Adi Purush Prabhu.
Very nice point about the fact that in a married couple, one influences the other. When you talk about higher or lower, you were mentioning that the goal is going in the spiritual direction, having faith in Krishna, serving Krishna, following scripture. And we can have some compatible people that have a very nice, happy marriage, and they're just helping each other go to hell. They get along very nicely and they're on the same page, but without the idea that the direction, the purpose, the goal is devotional service. So Krishna's so wonderful. We try to squeeze that in there. Krishna's so wonderful that he makes these arrangements for the upliftment. That Krishna is the goal of the Vedic knowledge. That he's not only making our life easy, but ecstatic if we're actually willing to accept that loving care. Anyway, nice class. Beautiful, perfect.
Thank you, yeah, thank you for bringing us back to the essence. That's the unifying factor between man and woman is Guru, is Krishna. That's the unifying factor. If they both have their eyes set on that, then, a little information of the different energies and how they work, that's helpful. But the real thing is when they're both united, because to unite, you have to be united on something, right? We talk about brotherhood and sisterhood in the world, but that only works when the Father is understood, the Supreme Father. Because what the brothers means brother in relationship to a father. Sisters means relationship to a father. You can't take that out. So when we try to create brotherhood and sisterhood, love between all people of this world, but not acknowledging the supreme origin of it all, it's not possible, actually. There has to unify, there has to be a unifying principle, a unifying factor. And that factor is God. So when man and woman have that, their hearts set on that goal, then they can actually properly be unified together in their relationship.
We've seen that when you say higher or lower, we've seen that there's a possibility of the husband influencing the wife and engaging, drawing into the realm of devotional service. We've also seen some very wonderful, intelligent, sincere Matajis sustaining and influencing their husband. And there's also a possibility, if you have somebody higher and lower, it's possible that the lower one will pull the higher one down. When you have that relationship and one is influencing the other, we have to remember that it can go either way. And therefore, like you said, the association of devotees, the coming together for sadhana, the hearing from the scriptures, the guidance of the spiritual master can help it go in the up direction rather than the down direction. Because we've seen that also, husband dragging wife down or wife dragging husband down. So that connection to the spiritual master is very important. So we don't slip down, because material energy is very powerful.
Yeah, good points. Absolutely. Yeah, the material energy can really, actually, it will entrap us if we don't have the spiritual connection. To get into this topic without understanding the spiritual connection, the spiritual purpose, people just get angry and upset with each other and everything. And like I said, people often go into a trance when you discuss such things. I don't find it controversial at all. I find it very interesting and enlightening, and I want to understand. Like for me, I think, okay, I'm in this man's body. So according to the Vedic culture, what is a real man? Okay, it says I'm supposed to lead. How do I lead properly? I'm interested in that. I want to know what that means. I want to be dutiful in doing that. So let me try to work towards that in a Krishna conscious way. And if I have a wife, which I do, who also is interested in this and also wants to know like the truth of the science of living and relationship, and she loves that I like that idea, she loves that, she supports me in that, and then things can be very wonderful.
Now, your wife is a great devotee. Angel has her hand up there.
Oh, yes. Angel.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I love your beautiful class, by the way. I really appreciate how you actually brought up the fact that in our generation, it's a challenging discussion to have about one's nature and man and nature being in their own nature, etc. And we fall into this trance, and because we're so attached to our gender or what society says nowadays, and that's the purpose. I think that many fall in this trance. But I was curious to know, well, from what I've witnessed and even experienced in myself, what the whole astrology thing works very well, so eloquently. But one thing that I have noticed is that even if they're informed about astrology, why is it that the men have it more difficult time surrendering to God than women? Women, it's easier for them to surrender to God, and then the man needs a guru in order to surrender to God or have that feminine activation activated within them, that energy. So that why is it so hard? I mean, I don't know if you understand my question, but
why is it easier for a woman to surrender to God or have that inclination?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the feminine principle is, if we can look at it in different ways, but there is this, there is this surrender that's kind of primary, even like we talk about like a woman surrendering to a man or something like that, that comes easier. And that can also, when the man is no good, that can lead to a woman being exploited, which we know happens. Okay. Right? But somehow the inclination.
Oh, just a second.
Adi Pushpa, you're unmuted.
Yeah, we have to go with time.
Oh, okay. So that surrender is a thing of the heart, right? The woman tends to be more centered there. in the heart, where a man, he has to get past a lot of intellectual things. Like my mind, I would say, like, 90% of the day, I'm probably thinking philosophically about things, and then also when I'm with my wife and something's going on that we need to discuss, or something personal, for me to enter into the emotional level, it's like turning a switch. I'm not like there. They say a woman is there, always there. A woman, she has the intelligence, the emotion, always operating simultaneously. And that makes it difficult for her sometimes too, when you want to, because she'll take it very personal or be emotional about things, and maybe you just want to have like a philosophical discussion. This is like a scenario in my life. We're talking about something and then it becomes like, but for me, it's like a man often is in that area of the head, and then coming into the heart, it's like turning a switch. It's like entering another room. But a woman is in both rooms at once, usually. And that could be, there's advantages to that, disadvantages to that, right? Everything healthy, unhealthy, that all has to be considered. A man, if he's too much in the head, if you look at that in an unhealthy way, he becomes very impersonal, very cold, very, unemotional. But there's an advantage to a man also being in the head, to understand things, to discern. This is considered a strength of a man, is discrimination, discernment, to understand really what is the difference between matter and spirit. The man stays there more, and he's often thinking on those things. And this is, of course, very close to the spiritual level, and therefore there's a link. The man can be a close link to God in some ways. And the woman's connection to God is often through the heart. The man's connection to God is often through the intellect. And again, you see how if you combine these things, you see how they both support each other and can help each other. And so women have that natural tendency of the heart. And so this idea of surrender to God can maybe make sense to them immediately. And it's yes, and be kind of this surrendered spirit, where a man has another approach, another way, another path to God, but also needs to go through this. I don't know, I said a lot, but I hope something there was maybe helped to make some sense of it.
No, it makes so much sense. Thank you. I didn't think about it so simply. You made it so obvious how the man is normally in the head, and the woman is normally the heart, and it's so true. And I see that when they have the guru, the feminine aspect in the men becomes alive. And I've been witnessing a lot of that lately in the Bhakti, like, because I've been attending a lot in the classes and everything. I'm blown away, because people who are not aware of any of this, there are a lot of men now, and I don't want to say a lot of men, but it's social media. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, but men tend to they think that because one is voicing their opinion, or to some extent, like they're saying that they want the woman to be feminine, but the masculine energy is so far from masculine. How could a woman feel safe to be of half that feminine energy all exposed to them? So it's like, oh my gosh, like
and that's what I was saying before. Like we want to take one part from this like picture and like enforce it. That never works. The force of it never works. You shouldn't have to command anybody anything, but if a man becomes a true man, I would say like he really develops what it really means, that kind of, then naturally the energies just start to automatically connect. You see, it's not a man saying, be like this, do that, or a woman saying, I need you to be like this and do that. If she's somehow situated in the true feminine nature, and a man is situated in the true feminine nature, then it just starts to come together. And because these are energies we're dealing with. And they're complementary. So I always like that symbol of the yin yang, because it's like the whole, and they're working together and they're supporting each other. And that happens in a spontaneous way when it becomes healthy. So there's no question of, just like, it's mentioned in the purport as well, this thing that a woman was so devout to the husband and so chaste that when the man would die, the woman would also voluntarily die. I mean, that's mind-blowing, right? It's like, but what happened later in India, and this is awful, you can hardly imagine anything more awful, because it was some like example from the past, because of this woman being so devout. They tried to enforce it. Can you imagine? A man would die and it was almost like enforced. Well, a woman should die too. That's a good woman, or something like that. And like, let's like push her in the fire. I mean, totally nuts, right? I mean, it's crazy, but there's to see the difference when things happen spontaneously from a depth, and when those same principles try to be enforced without any depth, without any spiritual understanding, and you try to make it happen. And then we see that what happens with that, just simply exploiters and exploited. That's all that will happen on material. And if you're in material consciousness, those are the only two options, because there's no spiritual root or connection. So really all you can do is exploit another or be exploited. And then the person who is exploited, then they become an exploiter because they're angry. And then, so these roles just keep reversing. You're cheated by somebody, and what does that do? There's an emotional reaction, you're upset. And then you become a cheater in some way, because life is not fair and you're going to get back, you're going to get revenge. And so on the lower material level, without a spiritual connection, this is how things unfold. And therefore there's so much pain between man, woman, husband, wife. And Prabhupada is saying, well, therefore we're seeing so many divorces, always so many divorces. But if one understands the Vedic principles, maybe this can be of some help to us. So we still have to understand how to apply it in the here and now. And that's not so easy sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have to admit that I don't want to take more of the time, but I have to admit that in the beginning of all of this, because I used to be very masculine, and I'm a single mother, and I'm trying to keep a roof over the head and take care of my son and direct my son. He's a teenager now, so I see that it's very annoying and irritating. But before I was like, oh, they want us to be too feminine in the Vedic, and I have to admit that I fell in that mentality. But the more I'm actually learning about how nature works, and everything is so obvious, and I really appreciate that the Vedic, like this Bhakti, we have the Vedic practices and all, because it makes sense. It balances everything in such a harmonious way. The foundation being Krishna, and those pillars they require certain energy. So like my son, I tell my son sometimes, like, I don't want to remove myself from my feminine energy or be that masculine energy, honey, but I need to direct you right now, and I need to tell you that this isn't okay. And it's so interesting how the Vedic has all of this. It's mind blown, but thank you so much for the class.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, our situations are just different and unique, and then we have to figure out how to use some of this information. And yeah, it's amazing how you're starting to kind of have an understanding and appreciation. It's not so easy in the beginning to kind of hear some of these things, because we think of the worst version of it, and we think of the abuse that takes place today because of certain things. And so we want to reject. But what I like to do is wow, this is in the scripture, and I know the scripture is connected to spiritual principles. So what is the principle here? And let me try to understand it, take a little time, and then make some adjustments in my life and see how that goes. That's kind of how it works. So I appreciate that you have that maturity and willingness to look at it in that way. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? I just have a couple more minutes before I have to go to work.
Hare Krishna, Ghanashyam Prabhu, beautiful
Hare
presentation.
Prabhu.
Thank you. When we are in a relationship and when we feel that our partner is not feminine enough or masculine enough, or not Krishna conscious enough, where do we start? How do we change? How do we turn things around? Do we start by changing them, or we start by changing ourselves, or where do we go? Or we start at the same time?
Yeah, and this depends on the willingness. It's easier when both have this same desire to understand these things and to work together and to be able to sit down and, it starts with a conversation. Let's look at this, let's discuss this. And, definitely it starts with ourselves, because as I was saying, there's a way in which when we really own what we are in a healthy way, there's a way in which that helps the other without forceful words, right? I need you to change. I need you to change. I need you to change. But when we change from within, it's almost like something clicks, like when we're actually truly owning what our nature is, right? It's like when you truly know yourself well, even with like something like a career, right? When it finally just clicks and something clicks and you know yourself well and what you want to do, what you're meant to do, then it's like a job can appear. We have the tendency to just, everything is forced, try to make things happen. But this is a whole nother approach of understanding my nature in a healthy way, owning that, entering into that with Krishna's help, that Krishna reveals this. And then something happens where it's understood from within. And then that has an effect on the other person. And again, there can be and the other person can be totally against all this, and then it's going to be more difficult, right? So that's why again, now we come back to the purport of the compatibility as an important factor before you get married, right? Compatibility. There's going to be feelings that they're very powerful. At the same time, we need to take a little guidance, consult some people, have some conversations before marriage that are very important, all those things. So that's why, again, the whole system supported it all. You see the question that you're having, there used to be a system where everything helped with that question. But now it's like all that's broken down and we just have me and the person in front of me. And it's like, okay, let's at least start with our understanding of where we stand on this, what we want to do, what is our goal. Let's have a talk, like that. So, and some thoughts.
Nice. Thank you very much, Ghanashyam.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Emily has questions in the chat also.
Oh, sorry. I'm not aware of the chat. What's going on there? I'll take maybe one question and then I'll have to. Let's see. Oops. Something. Okay, Emily, curious about attachment. You mentioned the man being chaste loyal to guru and woman being chaste loyal to man. So should the woman accept her attachment to man and his detachment towards her? Or what does a man's healthy attachment to a woman look like? And how does a woman's healthy detachment to man look like? Yeah, those are interesting, good questions. When a man truly is attached to guru and attached to God and attached to doing what's right, then he's loving. He's loving the woman in the right way. See? When a man is really a man of integrity and that relationship to the guru is primary in his life, think about what that's doing to a man. Purifying, it's powerful. And the feminine energy will appreciate that, will love that, right? And therefore, from that, you could say that the connection to the woman, the attachment to the woman is the man doing what's right and living for what's right, and that example. And there are so many other principles as well, like the man's said 2 things a man should be that are very helpful for the woman, and 2 ways the man can love the woman. And this is interesting: sense control and sensitivity, that he has sense control and he has sensitivity. It can bring out a kind of respect in the woman, that a man is very controlled. He's not just whimsical. He's not just has all kinds of bad habits, can't control himself, and also that he has a certain sensitivity. He's not just like cold. And so by developing these qualities, then again, the feminine principle becomes attracted to that. And for a woman, there's also two principles that attract a man. Women, these two principles are chastity and satisfaction. And, when that faithfulness and that loyalty actually is very inspiring for a man, then he becomes sold out to such a person. That's the idea of it. When he feels that my wife is very chaste in her behavior, I start to feel I'll do anything for this woman. I'll protect her completely. She's depending on me, and I have a responsibility, and I can see that it's attractive for the man. That's how his attachment. And also satisfaction. Woman, this is like these are austerities for both, by the way. So man, it's an austerity to be sense controlled and sensitive. For a woman, it's austere. It's hard to be chaste and to be satisfied. Just kind of like content. Well, whatever happens, I'm okay. That tends to be more of the man's nature. Right? He just kind of lets everything be fine. How you doing? I'm fine. The man will always say I'm fine. And you ask a woman how she's doing, and she'll tell you literally what's going on. It may not be fine. She'll be very honest about actually what's happening. And so the man has a tendency to be more kind of steady, you could say. And women less so. So satisfaction becomes a kind of like a focus for her. What does it mean to be satisfied right now? I want that. That'll be good. That'll be good for me. That'll be good for my husband. And so again, they both support each other by understanding some of these things. And when both are focused on these things, and then we'll see this natural love, natural attachment, and natural detachment. As you're mentioning here, it's nice because real love is attached and detached. Right? Real love has to let the other person also be, and sometimes let the other person go. That's love. When it's not, so like a mother who will never let go of the child, never let the child grow up. That's not love. She has to love with all her heart and then let go at some point too, and let this person be their own person. So that's a detachment, but it's the right kind of detachment. It actually serves the child, and so same thing with men and women. There's attachment and there's a detachment that both have to be there on both sides. And so those are just some thoughts. I'm sorry I have to head out now, but nice to share this conversation with all of you. And please forgive me if I said anything that anybody was offended by, but grateful for the opportunity to serve. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Wonderful presentation. Very balanced, very Krishna conscious. I'm sure nobody got offended. As long as Krishna is in the mix, how can one get offended? Okay, thank you everybody for tuning in. See you everyone tomorrow. Another day in Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much for participating, for showing up every morning steadily. Hare Krishna.